Welcome in to the latest episode of the Betting the Pitch podcast presents the NFL edition. I'm your host, real_G Warner, joined by A_Snicker. We went 0-2 in our best bets last week, so I am changing the karma. I'm wearing my Kansas City Chiefs long sleeve shirt because it might be nice to be on the side of winning things you don't deserve to. I feel like that's how this is all going to change. We had an awesome start to the year. It's not been so smooth lately, but it's about that time for playoffs. We're getting closer. We're figuring out who's good, who isn't. We're learning gradually or day by day what sides are going to screw us and what aren't. And hopefully we can avoid running backs dropping the ball on the 1 inch line, especially because I am a Jonathan Taylor fantasy owner. Fortunately, I had a bye last week. I heard millions of people lost their matchups by 6 or less because of that fumble. Probably 8 if you do a -2
Yeah, with the
fumbles.
-2 or -1, sure.
Unfortunately, that got A_Schnicker on his best bet. The Colts up 20-6 was a very different proposition, or 20-7, whatever the number
Yeah,
was.
27. Yeah.
Was a very different proposition than 13-7 with the Broncos having the ball. Still an ugly
Yeah.
game. What do you got in last week?
Yeah. Well, let's just pour salt in the wound on that one.
Let's do
Broncos
it.
had
I
less
wasn't
than
meaning to. I was just trying to give the people an
no, I
idea that
mean,
you
the
gave out a
Broncos had
good
less
pick
than
and didn't
200
win.
yards of offense. They I mean, Indianapolis turned the ball over 5 times. And yes, the Broncos turned it over 3 times. It was just a disgusting game. But yeah, the Indianapolis outgained them by 120 plus yards, and I felt really good about that. I thought, that was going to break our little spell. So now it's on us
You
this week.
you've been good. I've been struggling. My best bet was the Panthers. And I gotta
Yeah,
say,
that
I
was tough.
started to get some of the heebie-jeebies on Sunday where I was like, man, this is a horrible, horrible spot for the Cowboys. But the Panthers, like as a favorite after covering the
Yeah,
spread so many times as an underdog, it's very different to be a favorite. Unfortunately,
right.
it is, no matter what.
Yep.
And they also like when I was thinking, okay, how are the Panthers going to get a stop? And I feel like we haven't seen that in a long time. Plus, doesn't help when Bryce Young is fumbling and throwing deflected interceptions. Just got off to a
Yep.
bad start, and that's one of those things when you're a bad team, you really can't afford to get off to those. The upsets seem to happen when bad teams play a 60-minute game or even a 50-minute game, but have a big enough lead. And that certainly wasn't the case. So, on this episode, we're going to go through our six-pack of games as always, the standalones, which we have
We have a lot.
5 of them. And we'll see if we can get through to others of interest because Monday night is going to be garbage. But we'll start on Thursday with a pretty important game for a playoff seeding in the AFC. The Denver Broncos, currently a 3-point underdog with all the juice right now at BetOnline. If you're not a member of BetOnline, SportsBetting.ag, please take a look at the podcast description, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or on YouTube. Make sure you leave a 5-star review, but also follow the link, get some free money at those casinos. Broncos a 3-point underdog at BetOnline. Total is 42. And this game matters a lot now, especially with the Broncos beating the Colts, as already discussed, and the Chargers losing at home to the Bucks last week in what seemed like a close game blowout all of a sudden. Um, and these two teams are just trying to hang on to playoff spots at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, some would say the Broncos are thriving, even though they've haven't played the toughest of schedules. And while the Chargers have kind of come back down to earth after they were the eye of every, what's that? We'll move on to a different analogy,
They're
but
the belle of the ball.
bell of the ball, yes, okay.
They're
We
the
can go with
Adams of
that.
every apple.
Yes, okay, sure. That works too. We'll go with that. Um, so Herbert's health. I know you're not a huge fan of him in general. I think he's played pretty well this year. And he got a little bit dinged up more in that game against Tampa. And then that's really when it all started falling apart. Now he doesn't play defense, so you got to look at that side of the ball too. But that's going to be a main factor to me. Um, the Broncos, I'm starting to wonder if it's just Sean Payton's ability to get the most out of a team, um, and now we're seeing that in his second year. Do you have any leans on this? Because we've pretty much bashed Bo Nix for most of the year.
Still interested in bashing Bo Nix. A lot of picks this past weekend. Lot of good fortune went the Broncos' way. However, I think I'm more interested in talking about the line here. So, Charter 3-point favorite. We're basically giving no home field advantage at this point.
Yeah,
So the market certainly always does. So for that reason, we're always going to be interested in the Broncos. I feel like they've traveled very well on kind of surprising Monday nights. So I think we will see. Though the Chargers fan base seems to be growing in Los Angeles, partly because they're good, sweet uniforms, even though they don't wear the powder blues enough. Um, and they have this quarterback who basically Jim Harbaugh chose the Chargers over any other location, which didn't seem to be like a really smart idea, but he did have a quarterback, and I think he knows what he's doing. So we should have trusted that. I think we did to a certain extent. At least I laid off
yeah,
a Chargers regular season win total under that I was thinking about coming into the year. Um, and I do want to caution that we were really kind of into the Chargers based on a competitive effort they had on Sunday Night Football against the Kansas City Chiefs, which they entered halftime down 13 to nothing.
yeah.
They and I'm not slighting us or anyone for thinking, okay, that's a good loss, which it was. It was close. They could have won at the end if there wasn't a doinked field goal or whatever from a 130-pound soaking wet guy coming off of IR because he took one shot making a tackle on a kickoff for a different team. But um, with that all said, the Chargers couldn't do anything against a Chiefs defense in the first half. Scored 0 points, got 2 touchdowns in their first 2 drives, and then didn't do another thing. So we've kind of looked at them play maybe 2 quarters or maybe just one good third quarter out of the last 8 that they've played. Um, yes, they were competitive with the Bucks, but I don't think they were anything special. And the Bucks defense has plenty of flaws. Um,
Yeah.
so to me, I feel like there is a lot of respect in this number for the Chargers, considering they're starting the Statue of Liberty at quarterback right now. Herbert's not moving at all. He's had, and I've been one of his biggest questioners. I've been asking a lot of questions. I've been at his media sessions a lot in my brain, and I feel like the 3-point favorite here just feels like a lot, especially for a team that's now kind of got their backs against the wall a little bit. The Broncos with that win are now a game ahead. It still
Hmm.
feels like the teams that are in the playoff picture today in the AFC are going to finish in that position, but you want to get better seeds and you want to find different ways to get up and try to find a way to get against the 4 seed, essentially, trying to grab the Texans, who I think are potentially weaker than most. But
Hmm.
um, I guess maybe that's out of sight with the how well the Steelers slash Ravens have been playing. So like maybe that's not even realistic here. But these teams are until they're clinched in the playoffs, they're playing their best. They're not resting Justin Herbert because he's banged
Right.
up, trying to get more healthy. So if you're backing the Broncos here, it's a little bit different as an underdog, I think. First time these two teams played, I think the Chargers were a 3-point favorite in Denver and mopped the floor with the Broncos, but they had a running game which doesn't seem the same with Gus Edwards anymore. They had a quarterback who was a lot more mobile then, just more mobile than mud. And I feel like the more days that Bo Nix has played, the better that we've seen from him. Plus, the Broncos figured out a way to potentially stop their bleeding on defense, which Jameis Winston was tearing them up, of course, a bunch of pick sixes as he's known to do. But we didn't really see anything from Anthony Richardson. I'm not really sure what that says. I also love that I called him Josh Richardson on the end of our last podcast, but thank you for kind of
Yes.
correcting me until I watched it on the Realize posting. But um,
You were on a roll. How can I stop you? It was real
on a
time.
roll, on a roll. Just I'm just like butter. Um, but yeah, I think the Broncos +3 is my interest for Thursday night. Maybe a lean to under, but I
Yeah.
feel like unders are really tough these days, man.
Yeah. I 42.
I
I
mean,
can
it's
make a
not.
pretty good.
It's
Well, the
above
thing
the
though, the
30s
problem
I was playing
is
earlier this year, which basically, if you had a defensive touchdown or a bad turnover in a bad place, you're going to
yeah.
lose. So
Yeah.
that's nice. It's above that key area. But like these are relatively competent offenses. We know Sean Payton's going to draw up as many easy throws for Bo Nix as possible.
Yeah.
Um, I
And
guess you
he's
could
the big
argue,
question mark
can
for the
the
total.
go ahead.
Not in terms of like success, in terms of turning the ball over. Um, to me, putting the ball in harm's way will kill an under.
Well, kill an under and it kills your team because if you lose a turnover battle, you usually lose in the NFL.
Oh
So
yeah.
those are big concerns. But I do think if you're expecting a relatively even turnover battle, the Chargers laying 3 points at home, there's usually value going the other way. We'll move to
Hmm.
Saturday, which was supposed to be one of the bigger games of the year, and now we have the Houston Texans visiting the Kansas City Chiefs. We've seen a ton of movement, and unless I'm mistaken, the Texans were 3.5 point underdogs heading into last weekend's games. Then I saw them as a 3 point dog. Then I saw them as a 2 point favorite. And now they're back to a 2.5 point dog.
Yeah.
So a lot of that's dealing with a certain Patrick Mahomes and his ankle. The
Right.
total's 41 and a half. It was as high as 44 as I saw, and it's been heading downwards towards 40, now back to 41 and a half. What are your initial thoughts on this matchup? And if you've got Patrick Mahomes, what do you do?
If you have Pat, like if you have him like on fantasy football, or if you,
So, I mean, there's a lot of questions, I think, and he's a full participant in Tuesday's practice, Patrick
yes,
Mahomes.
yes.
So, do you play him? Do you,
Oh,
if
do you
you're if
start him?
you're the Kansas City Chiefs organization, because while both of our fantasy teams are alive, mine not alive in your league, but my other two are still ticking, barely. Thank you, Devonte Adams, for putting me into the hurt locker, almost ending my season in another league. But anyway.
Um, I think he's going to play. And yes, you're seeing the correlation. He said that it's not as severe as the ankle injury he had in the 2022 playoffs, which um, was a problem in that the game against the Bengals in the AFC Championship, and then the Super Bowl against the Eagles. He says this one's not as bad. I would
Won all
I
those games, by the way.
They won all of those games. Um, yeah, I would assume he's going to play. And can you imagine, like, man, if you grab the Chiefs +2 on Monday or Tuesday, that sounds great. Like the Texans can certainly beat the Chiefs. Let's not act like we've watched the Chiefs all year.
Chiefs can
And
lose to
just as
anybody.
your shirt, your jersey shirt, whatever you want to call it, says here, um,
Thank you. It's just a shirt, but we can call it a jersey if
a
you'd like.
jersey. You want to do a little jersey action?
Sure.
Um, they certainly have not. They've been probably one of the luckier teams. And then I think the Texans, but they lost. They should have lost last week to the Dolphins.
Oh, Tua.
That
Oh,
game,
man. Hawk Tua
unbelievable.
and all over everything.
Unbelievable. And I just
Four
don't
picks,
know.
or excuse me, four turnovers, three picks, a fumble, literally turning the wrong way and throwing the ball with no gas. It's like a Kirk Cousins out there.
Yeah.
It's just in teal. Oh my God. That
And
that guy.
I think you and I we were cautioning about Bobby Slovic, the offensive coordinator for the Texans, for a while, like going back to late last year. And I think that everyone just expected, he's a young coordinator, expected this progression, especially as he learned more about CJ Stroud and those wide receivers got more cohesion. And it's just fallen apart. It's awful. I don't understand with the talent that they have around CJ Stroud, how it looks like it does. And maybe it's D'Amico Ryans. Is it a philosophy type thing of a defensive coach trying to, make his side of the ball look better?
I mean,
I know
I think he's trying to win. I think Derek Stingley is a very good cornerback. He stole the game out of the hands of Tyreek Hill last week. Is his name not Derek?
sure. Okay.
I thought it was Derek Stingley. I could be
Yep,
wrong.
that's right.
I mean, that game, when the Dolphins are just handing you points on a platter, you can gain 150 yards and still score 20 points and win. But did feel that a Dolphins +3 bet was deserved. However, multiple
Interesting.
chances to get in the back door and potentially score a touchdown to uh, fail on a 2 point conversion and lose. Just neither of those seem to march down. In full Jameis activities after the Browns had a bunch of backdoor opportunities the previous weekend. I just feel like the Texans at 2.5 point underdog. I mean, very, very small chance. Yes, the Chiefs won by 2 against the Chargers at home, but very small window for the Texans to win here, if or to cover here if they're not winning. So I don't really think the Texans are good enough to end the Chiefs' streak of forever winning games they don't deserve. They certainly could do it, but I think the Chiefs defense will have something to say about that. And where do you think this number goes when Patrick Mahomes is a full participant on Wednesday?
I mean, I would feel good about it 3.5. That's about as far as I would want to go.
I mean, they were 4.5 to the Chargers, who played them twice, played a
Yeah.
tight game with them earlier this season. I think this number is going to keep climbing.
You think it's higher? I would rate the Texans. I would still rate the Texans higher than the Chargers
Okay, so
on a
that's a
neutral.
4.5 max, then you're saying, and
Yeah,
so
to me.
then a 3.5, 4 in that range, very different, and a huge significant math difference from a 2.5 right now,
Yeah.
even with slightly more juice at BetOnline, SportsBetting.ag, our sister sites or partners. To the Saturday evening game, or I guess early evening, the Pittsburgh Steelers are 6-point underdogs on the road at Baltimore after I think closing a 3-point dog at home in Pittsburgh earlier this year in an 18-16 win. Total's 44.5 in this one. What are your initial thoughts?
Mm. Well, you usually just take the underdog in this one, and you just don't even worry about it. There's going to be a lot of narrative this week about the Steelers and how, Lamar Jackson can't beat the Steelers. Um, there's more than just narrative. The Steelers' defensive front is awesome to watch. You're going to want to watch if TJ Watt is what he's doing in practice, if he's going to go. If his leg is functioning, I would assume that he's going to try to go. Um, but even if he's not able to play, you've got Herbig, you've got I'm forgetting the other defensive the
Ty
other pass
Smith or
rusher.
something like that. Yeah.
Um, and their defensive line's just gotten better and better as the year has gone on. Herbig's gotten healthy. Interior's been great. It's like been a throwback. Some of those guys are, late 30s and not late 30s, but mid 30s and still playing really, really well. So yeah, the question, I guess, on the other side is George Pickens is playing because Steelers offense, we saw what it was and what it isn't with the Eagles. So, I
Still,
mean,
just a running back actually looking at a toss play away from going in and potentially tying the game and making it a very, very interesting second half of the second half. If Najee first fumble of the year, so I guess it's bound to happen eventually. Just brutal when he drops and then kicks a toss that hits him right in the hand.
yeah.
Um, I think the Steelers dominated the first matchup. Were not able to separate, which is something you should expect from them as an offense. I think also makes the Steelers a very, very good fade in the playoffs as a home favorite. But for me as an underdog, Steelers are really hard to look away from. There's plenty of room for the Ravens to win this game and not cover at 6. Also
Hmm.
feels like with their questions at kicker, which has never been a thing, but was a big deal in their loss to the Philadelphia Eagles as a 3-point favorite at home a couple
Yep.
weeks ago. I think this is a low scoring game. I think that fits the Steelers. I think the Ravens struggle. We've seen Derrick Henry not scoring touchdowns lately. We'll see if that changes. But the Steelers +6 and under 44.5 look both very interesting and appealing to me, especially after somehow a pretty high scoring first half still finished full game under last weekend. We'll move to Sunday Night Football as we try to go through the standalone games and then get to Monday night, and then we'll come back and see how much time we have for the others. But Sunday night, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a 4-point favorite on the road to the Dallas Cowboys. Total is 48.5.
Yeah, this Cowboys deserve some credit for what they were able to do against Carolina.
Agreed.
Um, because usually at this point I've been piling on against the Cowboys.
I mean, any team could have just shriveled up after
but
their season ended
yeah,
on Monday night. Some idiot tried to Leon let it, and it's amazing, but it also like I think much credit to Mike McCarthy and the staff, even though they've had a really bad year and been the butt of a lot of jokes.
yeah, and you got Trayvon Diggs out for the season. That's announced on like Friday or Saturday. Um, you lose DeMarvion Overshown in that Monday night game. Like you're running out. It's basically Micah Parsons and then
He
like Deron
matters.
Bland and is working his way. Like that's it.
Micah Parsons does formerly known as Chandler Parsons. He does matter.
He
I would
matters.
say yes.
And so here, like this number is tough because I everything in my being wants to take Tampa, but like both of these teams just had really great games, and it's hard for me to, that's just not the model that I usually like to look at when picking a side is, okay, we've got two teams coming off great performances. How are we going to rate this? Um, I think Baker Mayfield getting a chance to come back to Dallas. I know he's not from Dallas, but he's, this is his area. Um, a wounded Cowboys team that looked good, but again, Panthers as a favorite, that was certainly, something that played into that. Golly, man, I would lean to the favorite here, which I feel like is pretty on brand for me because I'm usually against the Cowboys in these kinds of situations. Um, but four is pretty steep. You have a initial thought?
Yeah, Garland, Texas native, A underscore Schnicker, always going against the boys in blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the Cowboys +4. I feel like so it also just reminds me how stupid a Bengals -4.5 number was a couple weeks ago
Yeah.
on Monday night. Just absolutely ridiculous. The robbery of the century. The robbery. Well, yeah, because Leon Lett was technically a 93. That was the previous century. So hopefully I don't have to sustain another one of those. But I mean, the Bucks, yeah, they're better than the Bengals, but still, this number looks like you're given a lot. The question I have, and something I've always felt, really ever since the Cooper Rush run, while they still won a bunch of games when Dak Prescott was out, um, he had, I mean, an entire game-killing fumble on an exchange, up 10-0, driving to go up 17-0 in the first half. I think it was second
Hmm.
quarter. Panthers respond with a touchdown, cut it to 10-7. Those are the type of mistakes you just can't sustain. And I think that's what Cooper Rush is. Like, I feel like maybe, like, I figured eventually he would kind of wake up to who he was a few years ago, but the team isn't as good around him, and they're not able to run the same way they were. The Rico Dowdle is keeping me single-handedly alive in fantasy matchups right now. I just think unfortunately the Cowboys offense is so limited and the Bucks can score. Big question is how do they handle Mike Evans, who looks a lot healthier than he did just a few weeks ago. But also like the Bucks, who just nearly lost to the Panthers in that same stadium and should have, if not for a late Chuba Hubbard fumble. I think this is a closer game than expected. Sunday night, we probably should see a ton of money coming in the Bucks. Everyone chasing losses, money line parlays, all those sort of things. And I feel like if you're interested in backing the Bucks, you probably want to grab it sooner rather than later. I think you wait on the Cowboys, and if there's some late money
Yeah.
that comes in the Cowboys and knocks it down to 3.5 and then three, like I think I even like the Cowboys more. So I'll move to Monday Night Football, then we'll try to circle back and cover some other games because we didn't. Our six pack is pretty hamstrung this week with so many standalones, but
Hmm.
they're not all so bad, I guess. So good job by whoever the heck scheduled made these sort of things. Except for Monday night. Monday night's not great. The New Orleans Saints, they're visiting the Green Bay Packers. I currently see a lock icon on Bet Online, but the most recent number that I was staring at was the New Orleans Saints, a 13.5 point underdog on the
Yeah.
road at Green Bay. Total was 42 in this matchup, down from 43. The Packers couldn't have looked much better on Sunday night. Certainly aided by a Sam Howell replacement. But at the same time, Packers have been running the ball down everyone's throats lately, including the Detroit Lions before they had lost their nose tackle and other players. The Saints are probably got to be starting Spencer Rattler in this one after trying to figure out what to do and try to lose games, but it was too embarrassing. What do you think about this matchup? Do you have any interest, or do you want to just go back to Sunday?
Well, I think the Packers just need to keep doing what they're doing. Josh Jacobs' numbers weren't as eye-popping as I thought they looked in that Sunday night game. Like
Fumble?
the push that offensive line was getting, um, and that could have a little bit to do with Seattle. We've kind of bounced back and forth on, if when Seattle's had good performances, is it matchup based or is it actually quality of team? I believe Seattle is more matchup based in their success. Um, but yeah, it was just not competitive at all. I don't know what the Saints are playing for at this point. Darren Rizzi, their interim head coach, um, not doing much for me here. And yeah, I've talked a couple every couple of weeks. I keep going back to this, and I feel like Green Bay may be the playoff team to circle in the NFC. Um, as of right now, I think it's not a surprise, but I would probably I would have Philly and Green Bay in the NFC Championship game after all the injuries that Detroit's had to deal with. Um, so could be something to take a look at. I haven't looked at the futures market lately on what Green Bay's at.
Well,
What
my
do you like?
21 to 1 odds from earlier in the year, like you saying that. I think the Packers, unfortunately, they're going to be playing road games, so that's a big problem. But
Yeah.
that does mean they will be underdogs in most of their matchups. So that is certainly of interest, I think. And if they finish, I mean, I don't know if they'll be able to leapfrog Minnesota potentially for that 5 seed, but if you can get anyone coming out of the AFC South, I think you want that. The days of the Philadelphia Eagles just giving up on the season and still being a favorite on the road in the first round of the NFL playoffs, unfortunately, I think are gone. But it does seem like there are some good teams that aren't going to be winning divisions in the NFC, to say the least. I don't have much to say about this one. I think this is a blowout potentially, which might help the under, but also might not. And I feel like teams that have nothing to play for are really dangerous to put any sort of money on at this point in the season. So
Hmm.
we're going to go back through Sunday. Of course, we'll get to our best bets end of show. If you're not following us, please do so at the real underscore G Warner, at a underscore Snicker on Twitter, plus the Betting the Pitch podcast on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, plus at the real underscore G Warner on YouTube and on Instagram. If you want the 1 minute version, the reel that I put out there every Sunday, I try to get it out as soon as possible, but sometimes it does not align with the schedules. But fortunately, the year is thinning out, and maybe alongside my hair, I'll be able to do a little bit more earlier than later. What game do you want to go through first before we see the ticking time clock that hasn't somehow popped up just yet?
No, we're still we're doing well today. Let's go Philly, Washington.
A very interesting matchup considering the Commanders almost lost last week, which would have put them in
Yeah.
big, big trouble for a playoff spot that I don't think they're going to hold on to, or I didn't. Schedule was really fortunate though, and looking for teams that can beat them. Well, we found one. The Philadelphia Eagles currently a 3-point favorite with all the juice right now. Totals 45, just a little bit more to over. Philadelphia, to me, are looking like a team that's going to win the Super Bowl at this point. I don't love Jalen Hurts. I've been on record plenty about saying he's not a great quarterback. But I do think this system, I don't know if it's Kellen Moore's design, but it's literally going to chew up the clock and make it. You have to be so efficient playing against a Philadelphia Eagles. Just referencing the Steelers, the Steelers got nothing done for a lot of that game
Yeah.
on Sunday. They did somehow, they were driving potentially with a chance to tie the game, but a lot of that was due to turnovers and to me, what felt like good fortune. But moving the Philadelphia trenches is honestly almost impossible. As a Jalen Daniels owner in a fantasy league this week or rosterer, I'm pretty nervous that he's going to have a really tough time. I mean, maybe there'll be some garbage points out them for him. But man, I just feel like the Eagles, the way that they are successful is they have a great defense. They are going to control the ball and they are going to make it very hard on the other team to score. And you kind of have to match their scores because anytime it's 3rd and 3, they're going to go two rushes in some form or fashion, and it's really hard to get them off the field. You need to get them behind the line of scrimmage, basically, or losing yards, but they just don't seem to do that. I think there are a lot of questions about the health of Saquon Barkley, more so about AJ Brown, who I think is a bigger question going into this game, and maybe that's why this number has dropped from a 4 to a current 3. But I think we saw 3.5 as a look ahead number. I feel like these numbers are short, and I honestly made Philadelphia a bigger favorite.
Yeah. Well, this first matchup, Philly was the right side, although the first half they played with their food quite a bit, and it was a pretty ugly first half between these two. And then they just started leaning on them in the second half. Really kind of what they've built on. their identity for this year of just, being able to run the ball and in the second half, just out physicaling teams. And that's where I think the mismatch is that this is just such a physical team against a Washington offense that is just not physical. Kingsbury, every team we've watched, down the stretch, the kind of the not gimmicks, but his style of offense kind of it runs out of juice, and I think teams figure it out, and so I think that makes it tough because there's not just the staple like I don't know where you look on the Washington offense and say, yes, this is consistently the guy that's going to get you the tough yards, like the guy that's going to be physical. And you can guarantee that if, Kingsbury's type offense isn't clicking, at least you have something to fall back on. I don't think Washington does. And that's a problem against, like you said, the now probably the favorites in the NFC to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. Um, yeah, the injuries are going to be interesting. I think if anything, I would look to the total and I would look under on here, but it's just so, the second half, if Washington's defense can't get off the field, it could just be like last matchup and Saquon busts three big runs and it's 17 points in the span of 8 minutes of play and your total's cooked. So that would make me super nervous to take the under, but that's where I would look.
I think there's a lot of likelihood that there's a lot of Birds fans in this
Yeah.
stands as
Yep.
well. I don't think I think Washington has certainly made a comeback ever since Dan Snyder stopped pillaging the coffers, but at this point, I don't know necessarily that there's a number I really want to deal with Commanders. I think. Uh, as we get some little more time, I'd love your thoughts on the San Francisco 49ers now a pick 'em on the road at Miami.
Well, um, as weird as Miami's been, I feel like I've got a pretty good feel on them. Um, and I like them in this situation just because, what is San Francisco playing for at this point? Um,
I mean, the
but
false hope that they can somehow get out and win out and something might fall their way.
yeah, I mean, both of these teams are pretty much
Seattle
on their,
losing certainly helped. I mean, they
yeah, that's
lost
true.
themselves though, which is not great, and now have to finish ahead of the Rams. So maybe that's impossible at this point. But
I
uh,
mean, so the Dolphins offense, it's got all the names. The offensive line is terrible. The offensive line is so bad. Um, so that's part of it of just like the way we've seen this offense where it's, zipping it out the ball is into his hands for less than a second, which I think is the right move. But it's just really limited what this offense can be, and totally different than what we saw from them last year. On the defensive side, like they've got no pass rush. The secondary it's a revolving door with injuries. Um, yeah, these are two teams that I usually like to fade. So it's hard for me to figure out like which one. I think if you just looked at you took the logos off, you took the uniforms off, and just looked at the numbers, I think I would lean 49ers in this situation since it's just straight up a pick. But I haven't bet on the 49ers all year, and I'm not going to do it now.
yeah, so they need to win out, 49ers do. And the Rams need to lose out in order for the
Okay.
49ers to finish ahead because they'll lose the tiebreaker. So other than that, I guess they'd be looking at an NFL or NFC wild card potential, but I think the Commanders then have to lose out. So I think it's a little surprising though to me to see a 49ers team that's essentially eliminated get a ton of money bet on them down from 2.5 point underdogs all the way to pick them without a lot of injury notice. I haven't heard that Tua suffered another concussion, though it certainly looked like he was concussed with some of the passes he was throwing this past weekend. And at this point, the maybe the fire coach Mike stuff is coming a little bit louder. I think we got time for one more game if you want to throw one in there.
One more game. Let's discuss the Lions just because what we watched on Sunday. Where would you put them in they're playing the Bears. So we can kind of talk about that game, but I would really just love to hear your thoughts because everyone's felt like the Lions were the favorite in the NFC and now it's flipped just because of the injuries.
So Lions 6.5 point favorites. at Chicago. Totals 47 and a half. I don't know how you can make this number below a touchdown or
Yeah.
so. Like the Bears, I mean, they have they basically had incapable, inept head coach who they finally fired, but I mean the staff below him isn't better. And they got blown out by 49ers after the firing, then got blown out on Monday Night Football for everyone to see last night if you weren't switching to the other blowout that was on, which maybe is good. They made two Monday night games on, though it's a little stressful for fantasy. Um, I think the Lions are the team that I hope keep winning and will maintain a big seed and hopefully the one seed, and then they will be favored because they're at home. Because I don't think this defense is anywhere near capable. I do think it probably looked as bad as it could against a hot Buffalo offense like it did
Yeah.
last week and indoors. But if they're at home, they're going to be indoors, allowing anyone. It might be good for a Jared Goff fantasy owner and anyone trying to get some points from the Lions offense, but to me, it looks like the injury bug is too much. And at some point, the cluster injuries when they're across your entire team, I feel like, or at least the entire side of one side of the ball, I think that's too much. And that's probably all we have time for. So let's get going towards our best bets. This is the Betting the Pitch NFL podcast with A_Schnicker and the real underscore G Warner on Twitter. If you're not following us, please go do so and check us out on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. If you leave a 5-star review, it's huge for the search rankings, and at the real underscore G Warner, where you can get us on YouTube, plus the reels on Instagram and also YouTube Shorts for our 1 minute video. And that's what we do at this end part of the show at A_Schnicker. Where are you going for your best bet on this episode?
Okay, well, we just talked about the Eagles and Washington and looked at that total. I do think, the full game is something that I don't want to mess with. Um, I do feel comfortable with the first half, though. We've done a first half with the Eagles. It did not work out in our favor earlier. This is a divisional matchup. These two teams know each other well. Um, and with the injuries that Philadelphia may be facing, it could be a slow start to this game, um, just because the offense hasn't always been on the same page. So let's go with the Philadelphia Eagles under 22 and a half for the first half. And let's root for punts and a lot of decent drives, but not good enough drives.
And a lot of time being wasted. Hey, this is the
Yes.
real underscore G Warner on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube. This is the 1 minute best bet portion of the NFL edition. You just heard at A_Schnicker. He just gave his best bet out. You can catch us every Tuesday night talking about where lines will move until Sunday, or I guess this week, Saturday. But A_Schnicker just gave you the first half under 22 and a half in the Washington Commanders hosting the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday. For my best bet at the real underscore G Warner on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube, I'm going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars, a pick 'em on the road at the Las Vegas Raiders. Two teams that don't want to win this game. I think Vegas getting too much credit for a home game and a home crowd that doesn't matter. I'm not expecting a lot of Duval chants out in the crowd, but maybe there's some chance that some Jaguar fans want to go out to Vegas for near the holiday and near Christmas time. But go grab under 22 and a half first half, the Eagles at the Redskins, and grab the Jacksonville Jaguars, a pick 'em on the road in Vegas. And that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you later down the road and we'll tweet something out if we're changing our scheduling for Christmas week, as A_Schnicker's got to light the tree and whatever the heck else he has to do. I'm just gonna play with a dreidel or something like that. But I'll see you all later and have a good evening.